This morning, at the beginning of this morning, we had excellent presentations, and we now resume with this second session. Fortunately, I normally have the best speakers. So today, allow me to introduce two of the speakers that we will have today. Then we'll have a further speaker, and then yet two further speakers. So I will be making the introductions prior to each presentation. But we have an announcement. The organizers have requested us to make the following announcement. Please do not forget to return your headsets before you leave the room. And don't leave your belongings in the room when you leave, because there might be people who have left and have left their computers or mobile phones or backpacks. When you leave, take your things with you. I have the pleasure now of introducing a paper called The Next Era in Network Management Operations. This will be made by two very relevant people that I'll be introducing. The first of them is Álvaro Retana, who is an old friend of ours, who is now coming back. We're very happy to have him back. Álvaro is Vice President of Technological Strategy at FutureWide Technologies. He is an author of several books and RFCs, and he has patented more than 60 products in the United States. He co-chairs at the IETF the Spring Working Group and the other activities. He's also part of the Internet Research Turing Books, and he is a member of the Industry Network Technology Council. As you see, I always have great speakers to introduce. He will be remotely accompanied by Benoit Claes. Benoit was with us in Paraguay. Benoit is Data Communications Intelligent Operations Management. He's CTO, and he focuses on realizing the autonomous driving networks vision these days with his team in Ireland. He has collaborated in IETF and has worked with the young models throughout the industry. He has published numerous books like Álvaro. I will give the floor to them. Benoit is participating remotely. Álvaro is with us over here. They will be interacting, and let's welcome our speakers. Good morning, everyone. Buenos días.
Benoit is going to start the presentation. Benoit, are you there?
Yes, I'm there.
Maybe not.
So I'm talking, I'm there.
So we need the remote person first.
I'm there.
Como todo buen experimento, hay que improvisar algo. Yo me gustaría, como la persona que estuvo antes, que dijo que cantaba, yo no canto. Entonces no quieren que yo cante, pero nada. Bailaría, pero tampoco sé bailar. Entonces,
Let's try again.
Okay, here we go. Are you there?
I'm there, very good.
Okay, go.
So thank you very much, Alvaro. So good morning and welcome to this session. Thank you for joining me and a nice introduction. So in this presentation, what we want to cover is the next era of network management operations. This is an IAB workshop that took place in December last year. So we're going to be co-presenter with Alvaro. So on the next slide, please. Slide number 2. And I don't see the slide myself. So on the slide number 2, this is a workshop that we did in December 2024, and it was well advertised, it was well received, good participation, and the goal is that 22 years after the first workshop on network management that was impactful, that created the NetConf and the Yang, then we wanted to review the state of the union and see what has changed 22 years later, because obviously a few things have changed. On the next slides, as it was mentioned in the introduction, and I kind of understood this, I came last time in LACNIC to advertise this workshop, to invite you to participate, to receive your feedback directly during the meeting, in off-site meeting, and to invite you to participate directly in the NEMOPS working group, so the NEMOPS workshop, but also to populate the survey. And this is exactly what we've been doing. On the next slides, I want to remind you the key objectives of this workshop. The first one was to review the results of what we did in the workshop 22 years ago. What are the current deployments? What is the state of the art? And we wanted to identify the operational barrier that you as operator have been facing. Why, for example, you don't deploy the latest and greatest IETF technologies. And also we wanted to explore the new requirements, because the network operation job is evolving all the time, and that's something we need to understand. What are the new requirements these days? And most importantly, we wanted to develop a plan of action for the IETF, because in the end it's a workshop with the state of the art, but we also wanted to have from the IETF community and from the community, from this community, if you want to participate. We wanted to have this work done by the community. So on the next slide, we needed a kind of reach out to the different community, because we believe it's a dream to get all the operators participating to the IETF. It's a dream because it's complex, it takes time, and it's a lot of effort. So that's why we had this reach out. And the reach out to LACNIC, I came here, I went to RIPE in Europe. We also received great feedback from NANOC, from Autocon, from Apricot. And the follow-up that we're going to do is this outreach also with the results. So what we're going to see in this session, this is what we've been accomplishing. And on the next slide, you will see the program committee, which is composed of people from the IAB, the Internet Architecture Board, people from the IESG, the Internet Engineering Steering Group, the one is going to conduct new experiments, potentially creating new working groups, and also people from the operational teams. So feel free to contact any of us. So I mentioned the survey, right? Thank you for completing the survey. It was a great help to prepare this workshop. So I invite you to look at the results. I'm not going to cover all of them, but they are also in the backup slides. Everything is online. So questions such as, what tool do you use for config management, for monitoring, for APIs? Which protocol do you use? Is network automation important to you? Do you use telemetry? All of these. And the results are very interesting. So sometimes we're too much focused in developing the latest specification, the idea that we lose track of what is actually deployed. And that's what we wanted to understand. If it's not deployed, why? Is it a question of tooling, of training, of advertisement, etc., or simply because we don't fulfill your use cases with the IETF developed protocols and data models. So I advise you to review this. It's also interesting to see where you are compared to the industry and where the industry might be going. On the next slide, Alvaro will continue with reviewing what we did in the workshop. Alvaro?
Thank you, Benoit. So, as Benoit said, this was a workshop that we held 22 years after the first one. And part of the way it was organized is we had first a look back, what happened over the last 22 years. So this is the past. Then we looked at the present. Where are we today with respect to deploying tools? What are the requirements? And then we looked at the future. What are the new things that we need to think about? So what I'm going to do is relatively quickly go over what happened at the workshop, talk about the different things during the different days, and then Benoit is going to wrap up the session talking about the key takeaways that we had. So when we started with the past, the first thing that we did, of course, was talk about the experience of the last IAB workshop and what has happened since then. So we had several presentations from people talking about the journey that had happened, the challenges that we have seen in mapping, for example, higher level orchestration systems, and the lack of open source tools for people to go and implement and deploy the tools. So from the beginning, we started seeing barriers to adoption. One of the things that was highlighted by Wes Hardaker was the fact that many of the usability and simplicity goals had not necessarily been met by the management protocols and tools and implementations that are out there. There was a plea to rethink how management tools and protocols are standardized in the IETF. This is a topic that we saw all throughout the workshop. Sometimes there's a lack of full coverage of the models that maybe focus on devices, but you still need to go use the CLI. There needs to be a process of fast iteration in the IETF where it's sometimes a little bit slow. Tooling continues to be an issue. There are some performance issues that operators have seen when deploying the tools in large scale. And all of this signifies a very steep learning curve in terms of someone new getting the new systems in place. Backwards compatibility and versioning, or the lack of versioning challenges sometimes make it uncertain when trying to update from one Yang model to the next one. It was mentioned that system-level APIs could help address some of the specific operational issues that are out there. There are many protocols and languages that continue to maybe add a little bit more complexity, and there needs to be some harmonization between the different protocols and tools that are out there. When we turned into the present and talked about what are we more seeing today, one of the first topics that came up was the topic of monitoring, where some of the configuration systems are working fine, but where we need a lot more monitoring to be able to not only deploy, but operate the networks correctly and validate what is being done in our networks. There are challenges around complexity. There are new requirements that were presented. And again, the need for agile, iterative deployment came up. This is, as I said, a continuous topic throughout the workshop. Transitioning can be challenging, not only if you're starting from scratch into Yang, but as you move from one model to the other. Divergence was highlighted as well in vendor implementations, where there are both vendor-specific and standard models. This was a significant challenge. Mapping between those models is also a challenge. So the landscape has become complex. And the lack of open source reference implementations, of course, doesn't help. because it makes it so much harder for people to deploy some of the tools. It was mentioned that we need better compliance and interoperability testing. The fact that there are multiple models and that the models sometimes diverge or don't cover the same things make not only the selection, the implementation, the deployment of these models more complex. And again, as you can see there, it was mentioned that the IETF should expedite standard publication. Now, there's an interesting comment here that we should make the standards faster for Yang models, especially for management, but at the same time, we want to be able to gate them with multiple implementations to make sure that the models are correct, that they work, that they do what they need to do. Quickly, we moved into what we call the future. So where are we going next? Benoit actually presented a knowledge graph, which is a way to interpret or reinterpret the relationships between the different Yang models. This is a way to see how they are related, how they interact with each other. As I mentioned, there are multiple languages, multiple protocols. It was stressed by Ken Watson that maybe we should focus on a few of them, including, of course, RESTconf and Off-Box data models and protocol adapters to make that connection a lot easier. There is one of the big diverging points between the IETF standards and the OpenConfig models is the absence of an MDA in OpenConfig, which is present in all the IETF models. So this is part of the history of how the models were developed. Even though consensus sometimes takes time in the IETF to build, it is something that was considered important to maintain, but at the same time trying to be agile and moving faster with potentially off-box adapters helping vendors to continue to improve, but at the same time to keep compatibility with the native models that are out there. And then lastly, there were other approaches that were discussed about the Yang development models. Approaches that can be or could be implemented in the IETF at the working group level, different ways to charter or run working groups, different ways of collaborating that could signify IETF-wide changes or changes that the IETF could follow in the future. There was a lot of discussion that focused mostly on Yang and NetConf and RESTconf. There were other topics that the program committee thought were important around tooling gaps or around funding. If we want open source implementations, what is the funding model for that? And there were other network management protocols that were not discussed in the workshop. So there was a big focus on Yang and NetConf and RESTconf. So now I'm going to go back to Benoit, who's going to take the last part of the presentation. I'll talk about the takeaways.
Very good. Thank you, Alvaro. So we had a lot of discussions about the past, present, and the future. It was actually not easy to divide all of these 3 days because many of the operators and the protocol designers were using the past and the present to say what they wanted out of the future. So there was a lot of discussions with strong views, with diverse views, but also with common themes, obviously. And at the end of each workshop, what we try to do is that we try to evaluate what do we agree upon, what do we have consensus on. And we try to get from all the list of what we discussed, a small list of agreement. And we classify them into a couple of categories. The first one being the ecosystem. And Alvaro mentioned the ease of use, and this is still one of them where we were not doing great and we could be better. Whatever protocol or modeling system we have, we know it's complex. But this requirement is not surprising. Our networks are complex, there are legacy devices, new devices, different support, different features, etc. There is also a clear consensus that the ecosystem overall is fragmented for data models and for protocols. And again, it's complex, right? If you try to get like an old device which has got SNMP, while one you have to match it with CLI, the third one with RASCONF, and the fourth one with UNMI. This is complex. And there was also like a lack of documentation. It was observed as a requirement. Now, I believe that we went a long way with defining better schema, better data models with Yang. But what is needed is somehow how to use the model. What is the general architecture? Deployment guide, tutorial. And that's a question I receive multiple times when I present. I've got operators telling me, oh, I understand and I believe into this vision. Now, give me the first 3 steps I should be doing. This is where we should be doing a better job. And helping somehow with the point number 4, which is the transition, right? We discussed a lot IPv4 to IPv6 transition, and we discussed a lot for some time. And it's somehow the same thing with network management. The transition is challenging because we still have legacy devices, because we don't have the luxury to start networks from scratch. And the next observation and agreement is that model-driven network management with Yang is a success when it's implemented. So it's possible to use it. So we're still in the previous slide. And then the last one is tooling. Tooling is different. It's a difficult one, right? Everybody wants to have tooling. I mean, if it's like I ask you, do you want training? The answer is yes. So do you need tools? And there is like a lack of open source tool. It's an obvious one. Now, to be fair, it's one that is going to be difficult to complete because as the tools evolve, as the scenarios and the network management solutions evolve, we would need to have more tools and better tools along all the time. On the next slides, the category is now the protocol conclusions. The first one is that NetConf and Yang, they're used for configuration, but not enough for monitoring. And if you want to move into model-driven management for configuration, you want to be able to verify that your config is fine, verify that your services are fine with the same Yang models. And that's something on which we are still working on. The second one is NetConf and Yang. We still don't have the full coverage on my devices. So it's very complex if at the same time you try to move to this NetConf and Yang, but you still have to monitor, you still have to use CLI for some of the features, right? So this is one of the key takeaways that was observed. Also, the polling-based solution is still frequently deployed, and what do we have for Yang there, right? The push-based solution is Desire, and we are working on this typically in the NMOP working group, where we work on an architecture to push information even at the same frequency, right? And that would also answer the point number 1, NetConf and Yang not used yet for monitoring. All right, so on the next slide, the modeling conclusions now. There was consensus that some of the Yang models can become too complex. And it's not the fault of the language itself, it's potentially the fault that the IETF wants to be too perfect and wants to have one single Yang model that's going to cover everything. And maybe this is something that we want to cover by having incremental improvements, as mentioned by Alvaro. The multi-vendor compatibility is required, right? So I believe into that, for example, for the device level network Yang models, like an OSPF should be done the same way on all vendors. Same thing for ISIS. Now, there are still some vendor-specific features just because vendors want to differentiate themselves. So those features are going to be difficult to standardize, but they need to be exposed through those models. And the point number 4, there was like a general consensus that we want to have a better support for service level modeling. And interestingly, that observation was already there 22 years ago with the first workshop on network management. So this is still something we need to improve. We had a couple of service level models in the IETF, but the point is that we want to be able to have something complete for the entire network, for entire services. And the last takeaway on the modeling is that we want to have a way to verify what we have configured. Once we have configured it, or ideally even before the configuration, to check if what we're going to do is what we want. And whenever it's applied correctly, we want to come back to a previous point that I would like to have those data models also for the monitoring or for the assurance of this feature or services I deployed in the network. On the next slide, now on the process itself, on the standardization, well, as Alvaro was noting, we need a methodology of rapid model development. The point is that we need to have faster models. Some models have been taking years to standardize, and maybe we're doing this the wrong way, because as I mentioned, maybe we want to have those models perfect day one, and it's actually a feature from those data models that they should not be backward compatible. And maybe it was a mistake. Maybe like the OpenConfig world, we want to say, you know what? I made a mistake in the first one. I try very quickly, I deploy it, it doesn't work, let me get version 2. And if it's backward incompatible, then okay, so be it. But we will not be spending years and years to try to get the perfect model because maybe it's too late. And on the timing issue, what the operators are telling is that we need to have a kind of predictable time for developing and publishing those models, those protocols. Because any operators will work with like, oh, I would like to have MVP 1 by that time, MVP 2 by the other time. So I would like to guarantee that you will get a document published in advance that I could ask all my vendors, because obviously my network is multi-vendor. I would ask my vendors to implement it. And then, as I mentioned, we want to have a minimum amount of features and improve this. And something important as well, this is the scalability. Just telling this is a protocol, well, no, every single operator, they care about, will the solution work in a scalable way? So, okay, on the next slide, what's next? Well, a workshop is the beginning. This is just a spark before the work is actually done. So the previous workshop 22 years ago started NetConf and Yang. Now, what can we conclude? Can we extract the actionable item there and make some progress in the industry and at the IETF? You've got there in the middle of the slide a report which contains all of the information I've been sharing, we've been sharing very quickly here. Please review it. Now, what can we do practically? In the Network Management Operation Working Group, and I happen to be a co-chair for that one, we are thinking about those, right? An architecture for Yang push, a digital map, knowledge graph and all this, and we are encouraging your participation. Feel free to contact me. The last bullet point, the RFC 3535, maybe you don't know it, but that was the one that was required, that was done 22 years ago. And I'm going to finish in 30 seconds. There is this document in which we're going to get all the different requirements and prioritize them. on the next slide. And the final slide, this is call for action. Well, review the report, contact us, let's be involved, and even for this RFC 3545 bis. And sorry I could not be with you physically. I will try to solve this for next time. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I don't think we have time for questions, but please look at the backup slides. There are many graphs there about the input that we received. Please read the report and contact us if you have any questions. Thank you so much.
Aló.
If Benoit is there,
Aló, aló.
there's one question.
Sí, bueno,